Princess Catherine has just done something the royal household almost never allows, and the reason behind it is what has everyone talking. This was not one of those polished palace updates filled with careful wording and safe phrases. This felt personal, it felt deliberate, and most of all, it felt like a message that was never meant to stay hidden this long. Because according to growing royal chatter, Catherine chose to speak more openly about Prince Louis's private recovery journey after months of silence, shifting schedules, and quiet concern behind the scenes. For weeks, people noticed that what makes this story so powerful is that it may not have been public pressure that changed Catherine's mind. It may have been something much closer to home, because the real turning point, if the reports are to be believed, was not a headline, not a commentator, and not palace advisors pushing for damage control, small signs. Engagements moved, family appearances changed, questions started building. It was the emotional effect that all this silence may have been having on Louis himself. And in just a moment, I'm going to get to the one detail that reportedly changed everything inside the family, because if true, it explains why Catherine finally decided this could not stay locked behind palace walls. But before we go further, if you enjoy thoughtful royal coverage that goes beyond the headlines, take a second to like this video and subscribe to Crown Chronicles. It really helps the channel, and if stories like this fascinate you, you want to stay with us, because the part coming up about what happened inside the family is easily the most revealing piece of the entire story. Now, here's why this has struck such a nerve. Royal families are built on image, timing, and control. Every public appearance is measured. Every statement is weighed. Every absence gets noticed. So when Prince Louis, one of the most recognizable young royals, is seen less often or appears to be missing from moments where people expected him, it does not take long for speculation to spread. That is exactly why the palace usually moves carefully. Too much information invites scrutiny. Too little information invites rumors. And according to royal insiders, William believed that keeping everything as private as possible was the safest option. From his point of view, Louis is still a child. He should not have to grow up under a spotlight that turns every difficult moment into public discussion. And honestly, that instinct makes sense. Any parent would want to protect a child from public commentary, especially in a family where even the smallest expressions get frozen into headlines. But what Catherine reportedly came to realize was that silence can protect on the outside while hurting on the inside. Family plans had to be adjusted. Moments that were supposed to be simple became more carefully managed. And as that period stretched on, the atmosphere around him reportedly changed too. Conversations lowered. Doors closed more often. Certain topics stopped the moment he entered the room. That may sound like protection, but from a child's perspective, it can feel like something very different. And this is the detail that has reportedly shaken so many royal watchers. Catherine is said to have realized that Louis may have started to feel as though his condition was being hidden because it was something shameful. Think about that for a moment. Not because anyone told him that directly, but because children notice what adults do not say. They notice the pauses. They notice the worried looks. They notice when their normal life suddenly becomes delicate. And if that was truly what Louis began to feel, then this was no longer just a privacy strategy. It was becoming an emotional burden. That is where Prince William and Princess Catherine reportedly began seeing the situation differently. William is said to have focused on shielding Louis from the outside world. Catherine, meanwhile, began focusing on what all that shielding might be communicating inside their own home. Those are two loving instincts, but they do not always lead to the same decision. William reportedly believed every unanswered question from the public was preferable to exposing a child's vulnerable season. Catherine reportedly believed there had to be a way to tell the truth without giving away every private ... detail, not for the press, not for the commentators, for Louis. And then came the moment that may have changed the conversation entirely. According to reports, Catherine prepared words that felt more personal than the usual palace language, not dramatic, not sensational, just honest enough to say this had been difficult, honest enough to recognize the people helping Louis through it. What reportedly broke through that final wall was not strategy, but perspective. The suggestion is that Louis wanted the people around him to know he was trying, improving, and moving forward. He did. not want to be remembered as the child who vanished from view. He wanted to be seen as brave. And if that is true, it explains why Catherine's choice now feels less like a palace maneuver and more like a mother correcting the emotional meaning of months of silence. There's also another layer here that people often overlook in a family like this. Nothing affects only one person. If Louise was going through a hard private stretch, George and Charlotte would have felt it too. They would have seen routines change. They would have sensed tension in the adults around them. They would have understood that something important was happening, even if nobody sat them down and explained every detail. Families do not need full explanations to feel pressure. They absorb ... So when Catherine finally moved toward a more personal message, it may have been about all three children, not just one. It may have been about making sure Louise did not feel hidden, while also making sure his brother and sister did not learn that hard moments must always be wrapped in silence. That is a powerful shift, especially in a family defined for generations by reserve. Monarchy has long believed that restraint protects dignity, but Catherine's apparent decision suggests there are times when warmth protects dignity better than distance does. And that is why the involvement of King Charles, at least in the versions of the story now circulating, matters so much. Because if a more personal message truly moved forward, it likely would have needed support at the highest level, not because every word must be dramatic, but because every royal statement carries consequences far beyond the moment it is delivered. The reported thinking seems to have been simple. What happened next is what really stunned people. The response was not just curiosity, it was empathy. Instead of treating the story like gossip, many observers responded to the emotional heart of it. Parents recognized the fear of trying to stay strong for a child. Families understood how difficult ... it can be to protect privacy without making a loved one feel isolated. And royal watchers who are used to polish statements saw something rarer here, vulnerability handled with restraint. That ... combination is powerful. It does not beg for sympathy, it earns respect. And perhaps the most important part of all is what this could mean for Louis going forward. Recovery, especially for a child, is not only about feeling better physically, it is also about recovering confidence, routine, and that sense of ease children are supposed to have. It was about giving Louis back the story of his own strength, not as a symbol, not as a royal talking point, just as a child who had gone through a difficult period and was finding his way forward again. That is why this story has landed so differently from the usual royal drama. It is not really about palace strategy. It is not even mainly about public reaction. It is about a family discovering that protection can take more than one form. Sometimes protection means drawing a hard boundary around private pain. And sometimes it means speaking just enough truth so that the person you love does not confuse silence with shame. If Catherine truly made that call, then it may go down as one of the most quietly significant choices we have seen from the modern royal family. Because in the end, this was never about revealing everything. It was about revealing just enough to replace mystery with reassurance, just enough to replace absence with understanding, just enough to let people know that Prince Louis was not simply out of sight, but on a journey back to strength, surrounded by a family trying to balance love, duty, privacy, and fear, all that on sea. And maybe that is why this reveal hit so hard, not because it was loud, but because it felt real. If you want more royal stories told with context, care, and the details that others miss, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Crown Chronicles, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.